I'm not going to read the canned overview about Zoom, but I will give a quick overview of the fact that we're meeting remotely due to the governor's order related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that we're using Zoom for that, so that the meeting is closed to the public, but the public can still all participate via Zoom. Both we're streaming the meeting live, and we're also recording it for later broadcasting. So I'm going to start out acting as the chairman just to get us all kicked off. 1 second. And I'm just going to read everybody's name and ask you just to note for the record that you're here. Chris Baker.
Here.
Aaron Hunt.
Here.
Jim O'Neill.
Here.
Kevin Champagne.
Here.
Justin Yanosik.
Here.
And Aaron Kinney.
Present.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'd also like to introduce you to two staff people that will be supporting us, and they're going to do an awesome job doing that. First, you can see just joining on your screen, Matt Hafner. Matt is our town and school shared facilities director. And Matt has a very good handle on the building itself. I mean, the chief knows all about fire department and everything that goes on with that. And Matt's our expert with regard to the building itself because he takes care of it and deals with any issues that come up. He also has very relevant, very recent experience acting as the OPM on the police station project when the town had to part ways with the OPM that it had. So welcome, Matt. Nice to see you. And also joining us is Todd Lindmark. Todd is our finance director, and Todd was intimately familiar with the dollars spent and how that happened with the police station project. And he does an awesome job as well. And so he's here to talk a little bit about the budget section that we'll go over. And then he'll be supporting the project. Not sure that either one of them will be at all of our meetings, but they're an awesome resource that we will take advantage of at different times. So that's to get us kicked off. So I'm going to go through the agenda. I don't anticipate I'm going to be the chairman for a real long time, but I'm going to do that to get us going and underway. And we'll talk about that more a little bit later. And the first item on our agenda is public comment. We always have included that in select board's agendas in case any member of the public would like to address the committee on a matter before them. So I don't see any public that I recognize in the meeting, but just want to put that out there. If anyone would like to address the committee on anything, please feel free to do so. And just either raise your hand electronically or otherwise. I am not seeing any hands, so we'll move along. So the first item on the agenda is, after that, is to discuss the committee's charge and next steps. In your packet that you received is the charge that the select board approved. This is the previous committee for the police station didn't actually have a charge, but after learning the lessons from that project and also seeing how the state, the Massachusetts School Building Authority handles school projects that they fund, they have a very, very thorough process and steps that they require projects to go through. And I've noticed in doing some research that a number of communities, they adopt a charge, which is basically a job description or a guiding document that helps a committee know what they're supposed to be doing in the order that is expected that they will do it, and the things that they should be mindful of while they are. So that's what guided the select board to put this together. And we are at the very beginning. So the committee's been formed. Have you all been sworn in? I should ask that question. Everybody had a chance to get to Carol?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome, great. And so here we are ready to get going. And what does that involve? Well, in Massachusetts, the state requires that if you're going to spend more than $1.5 million on a project, you need to have an owner's project manager, and they have to have certain background and bring certain responsibilities to helping a community manage the project that they're going to do. It's probably more helpful in smaller communities who may or may not have the experience and they don't do a project like this very often. You know, a new school or a new or renovated fire station just doesn't happen every day. Bigger communities, probably do have a little bit more of experience in that area. And regardless, that's required. And I think I included in your packet the section of the law on that. And so really the first thing we're going to do is go out and solicit that owner's project manager. And we'll talk about the process for doing that a little bit later in the meeting. But since you've all been sworn in and done a little studying and hopefully taken a tour of the building, I just wanted to go through the charge and see if anyone had any questions or any thoughts about it as we get underway. Have you had a chance to look at it? Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask about it or comment on?
Blythe, I'll jump in. I'll just say I'm glad that it exists because I think it was one of the downsides of the B1 committee that we didn't really have a charge and a path forward. And it's nice to have guidelines to stay with. So, thank you.
Yep. And also understand that this is developed by the select board. So if we're going along our work and we discover something we think we should be doing or something that maybe doesn't make sense, we can reach back out to the select board and say, hey, we think you should amend this in some way. It's not etched in stone. We can revise it. So as you see in the first page, the powers and duties during the feasibility study phase are to develop this process to select the owner's project manager or OPM as we call it, go through the process to recommend that company to the select board for approval to hire, and then actually draft that feasibility study report. Interestingly, I was able to find in the files this morning a 2009 feasibility study. It was done by an architectural firm called Castle Booz. That is now 11 years old, and the building hasn't had any new work done on it of any major importance in that time. And so it's probably still relevant. If not, there's more things that would need to be addressed. For example, Matt led a company to do a mold study and an air quality study of the building in 2019 because of concerns about indoor air quality. So I'm guessing that we will find more than we found then, but it's still important, even if the building is in, one of the driving questions here is this building able to be renovated and expanded upon in order to meet the future needs of the department? Or is it got enough things that are difficult about it that it would be spending, throwing good money after bad to try to renovate it? And the better play is to perhaps replace it, in stages. I think that's one of the first things the select board really want to understand is, what are we really looking at here? What's the situation and what's the best path forward for the town?
So, Bladino, was there another feasibility study done by the architect that was hired to do the actual design of the police and fire station?
So that's what the files show us, but unfortunately, Aaron, Matt, and I were not here when that happened, and we haven't been able to locate it yet.
Okay.
So the short answer is no, but we're still looking. And the fire chief who was here is gone, was gone as well. Chief Stone was here and Bob Bullock, the building official, were here, so still have to double check with them. But even if it was probably done in about 2012 or 13.
Yeah, I looked back. I think I mentioned when we were assigning committee members that I was part of a team that bid on the project. I think it was in 2015. And so it may be a little more recent than that if it is available. I honestly can't remember if that was part of the scope or not to do another feasibility study.
I think that you're correct. The issue is we haven't found it, and we're in a little bit difficult situation because we have formally cut ties with the architect who we had at the time. So not necessarily in a situation where we can call up and say, hey, can we get a copy of that?
Right.
Same with the OPM, which makes it a little challenging. But we will definitely keep looking, but I at least wanted to get this to you guys to give you some sense of it as where we stand now. But so have any of you ever worked with an OPM on a project such as this before?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're usually a sub to the architect, so there's not a lot of direct involvement with the OPM until we go to the field or whatever in construction. But yes, we have in the past.
So I've worked on a couple of projects where we had an OPM from the beginning, and part of what they're going to do is they are assisting us then after they get hired in developing the budget, developing timelines, helping us hire the architect, walking us through that process, being our eyes and ears on what the designer is doing and eventually what the contractor is doing. To some extent, I think it'll be a decision point at some point whether we decide to have a clerk of the works as well or we don't for this project. That'll be a committee decision. But they're going to be our eyes and ears to help us navigate the project and be the ones to give us their best advice about what decisions we should make along the way, help us question things and get good decisions and help us keep on track.
Blythe, two questions. Do we have any idea what the budget is?
Yes, so if we go to item number 3 in your packet, this has been prepared by Todd. Todd, do you want to take it away on this particular area?
So Aaron, if I understand your question, you're probably requesting what is it the ultimate budget's going to be? Again, we have a little over 3.3 remaining from the previous police, fire, building combo. But as far as what the actual cost is for the new fire station, no, we don't have that obviously because we need to get that bid out. But we have 3.3 of cash available to use now.
So do we, I guess, so let me ask a follow-up. So we have 3.3, we know it's, well, we're not sure what we can get for 3.3. Is there does the town have an idea what the right target is? Like, is it 4, is it 5, is it 10, is it 20?
Based on best guesstimates, I would say it's probably closer to $8.5, maybe $9 million for a building. And I don't want to take any thunder away from Matt or Aaron as far as their previous discussions with the architect before we lost services with him, because he did a couple of renditions for us. But based on that information, that's kind of where the target is in order to do just the fire station where it is. And it could be a combination of you're going to go a full brand new building, a lot more obviously. But if you're going to just basically redo the building and then work on the apparatus bay, putting in a new apparatus bay to handle all the equipment going forward, that's targeted about like $7 to $8 million.
So the difficult part here is no, if there's a possibility that we could somehow renovate the building and have the appropriate sized apparatus bay and all the things that need to go in a fire station within the around within the walls that we have or something close to it, I don't know that that's possible and meet all today's codes and, ADA and all that. Could you do it for 3.3? Probably not. When we were finishing up the presentation about the police station in December, we looked at what other communities had done stations for in recent years. And those projects were at least, I think, around $550 a square foot. So we had looked at when the previous architect had looked at this project, it was looking around 16 or 17,000 square feet, which quickly gets you to about 10 million. I think the other thing about the project previously was there was a thought that they would move off campus, if you will, to the DPW and work out of there for some number of months or a year and move back. And there was all kinds of costs to make that viable and then build back where we were. So it would, part of the feasibility is figuring these things out and being able to say to the board, look, the building is in really tough shape and we need to replace it. And ideally we can replace it while staying, on site and doing it in stages. There's definitely not an interest in relocating to another place. That's not what we're thinking right now. That's in part why the town bought the land from the Federated Church in about 2009 or before. So we had the space, and that's when it was going to be a joint station. So can we build on site? Can we do it? Do one floor or two in part? And those are all the sorts of things the committee needs to figure out. And then the tough part is if we say we need $9 million, for an example, then we're going to have to go back to the town and ask for the difference and demonstrate to them why we do. And there's no specific timing for that. I think we want to get going as quickly as we can and move with purpose, just because it's difficult to work, in the situation that they're in right now. That answer your question, Aaron?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Nice.
there's gonna be some tough work to do here to get through those. But on the positive side, and the chief is looking at his fleet overall. And one of the things that we're proposing is to take 2 trucks and replace them with 1. And so some of those decisions that we're trying to make right now will hopefully make this job a little easier than otherwise, it had seemed. Chief, do you have any thoughts about that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think just, trying to evaluate, multiple things, and things that we're working on in terms of the fleet, the apparatus and those kind of things is, looking at what the impact is, on everything, including a new building. If we're able to streamline and make our apparatus fleet, more efficient, if you will, not lose any effectiveness, not lose any, ISO points, but, kind of meld the roles of 2 different apparatus into one, that allows us to save on the square footage in the bay, for example. It allows us to shrink the footprint a little bit. So, we're trying to incorporate and look at all of those factors, to try to make this, to have the most impact and the most bang for our buck.
That's a good lead into my second question, which is, do we have an idea of what the program we're looking for to put into the buildings type of thing from, I suppose, the department's point of view?
So we haven't developed a program document yet. That's in part what I would look to the OPM to help us with. And I don't know if a program exists from the work done. Chief, that would be a good thing to look for in the previous chief's files is, did they develop a program that says we need bug space for a certain number of people, a training room of a certain size, what other elements, have to go into the building? that would be a good, if we don't have to reinvent that, we have that, that would be a good place to start. That's a great question.
Yeah, or at least able to turn it over to the OPM and architect gets hired and say, here's, what's been done before. I think that'll help them, develop
Matt,
this.
have you seen anything like that in your travels of the files?
You see, Matt, Blythe, I'm sorry.
Yes, have you seen
Yeah,
anything like that?
we had multiple meetings with the fire department staff, the previous staff, and most of the firefighters are still on board with the architect. One thing that continued to happen, though, was that the budget kept shrinking. So I know a lot of things kept getting cut down because we knew we were losing a budget. So I think we have some proposed schematics that were really continue to be downgraded, which is we want to live within our budget, but we're cutting more than possibly we should have to try to fulfill the budget that we had.
Yeah, but let's see if we can find an actual program listing of all the things that we should have in the building. I mean, part of the difficulty of this project is people are still frustrated about the cost of the police station. And while I'd say generally know we need a new, replace and expand the fire station, no one's excited about paying more for it. So finding the balance between what we need and what we should, what they want to spend is probably going to be the hardest part here. And having it be what we need, but not necessarily anything more than that. And planning, I guess I would qualify that by saying planning into the future so we know the station will do the town well for the next few decades.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I had started kind of referring to and studying a little bit is the U.S. Fire Administration has a document that they put out for best practices in constructing new fire stations so that they, are in line with obviously current building code, but also, your different factors that, fire departments are facing as the workforce becomes more diverse, the different areas based on, cancer prevalence in the fire service and having decon rooms and proper storage and locker rooms and things like that. Obviously reading through that, some of that stuff has an upfront cost, but one of the things in the document is it talks about how it saves the town or saves, municipalities in the long run. And that's something that I can share with the group. I've got a copy of it on my desktop in the office, and I can probably share that. It gets pretty detailed. It gets all the way down into what kind of doors are recommended to buy for fire stations, for example. But again, it's a good tool to look at as something to steer us maybe in this direction, and maybe also we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel because there's a lot of documented components and things that are considered to be best practices to be in these type of projects and buildings.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a current sort of must-have list, would like to have list, and would be great to have list or something too, just so we know we're current. And actually that made me think of a follow-up question, Blythe, and the charge kind of alludes to it, but are there goals that the town has for this building? Like I noticed the word sustainable used a few times in the wording of the documents. Is there some sort of program or some goals that the town is trying to achieve?
Not that have been enunciated beyond this document by the board. I think the town doesn't have unending resources. So doing a project that's going to be, it's going to meet the department's needs for the next few decades, is very important. That fits into the character of the area that it's going to be in. I think sustainability is something that we ought to look at. The governor just signed a climate bill just the other day. How green do we want to be and how much do we want to pay for that? I think is a decision point the committee needs to make.
We are now a green community.
And we are now a green community, that's right. So, what level of LEED certification, do we want to actually go after LEED certification, or just want to build to a certain standard is a question. And as we get closer to nailing down the size of the building and all the things to have in it, and we start to get an idea of the cost, certainly a question is, well, how much do we want to spend and what's the right number to ask the community for? I guess those are off the top of my head. But the board hasn't come up with a, this is our exact vision. No. Anybody have any thought? That's a good question though. Is anyone having thoughts about that? Well, we can continue to ponder, I guess. But just to stay on the budget a little bit longer. So what I had asked Todd to do, and he did well, is to give you an outline of all the costs that we might expect to have. We haven't populated any of the accounts because it's too soon to know all that yet. But if you haven't been involved in a project, like this to this level, these are the sorts of things we can expect. It isn't necessarily everything. And that's part of what the OPM will help us with. And you'll all definitely have, say in that.
Blythe, if I can jump in again, sorry, but maybe this is to Todd and Matt too. Could you remind me what we actually paid for the police station and how many square feet we got out of it?
10.8. I don't know the square footage. Matt has that.
Those facts are all in the presentation I think we made in mid-December, so I can make sure we get that out to everybody. It's more than you're asking for, but I think all that's contained in there.
It might be worth watching that presentation. So I'll go looking for it on YouTube.
I'll send you the PowerPoint.
Well, even better.
I think it even did a comparison on other public safety buildings to say, cost comparatively, how did we benchmark against those that recently put up similar type buildings? Obviously, try and compare apples to apples as best you can. Some facilities had both police and fire, some were standalones. So that there was like 5 or 6, I think, as a comparative in that analysis.
I think the takeaway I recall on that was overall, the police station cost more than our residents wanted to spend, but didn't cost necessarily more than the average of other projects. But to qualify that, there was a point made by one of the planning board members, other than yourself, Aaron, who said, some of those stations were, brick buildings, and we have a metal building. It wasn't necessarily the same standard of construction. And the takeaway for me, having never been involved in the project at all till I, walked into the ribbon cutting in 2019, was that I think people the previous building committee did all it tried to do its best job to keep costs down, but some things got away from them. Some things just cost more than they were led to believe. And the whole thing cost more than the residents thought it would. And there was, significant frustration by that. But at the end of the day, it wasn't out of the realm of what these sorts of things just cost. And so when we talked, at the end of that presentation, we put a number in there. We pegged the fire station at 8 to 10 million based on what we learned from those other projects. Anybody have any questions about the budget or thoughts?
I think to Aaron's point, I think the program is going to be a good first step once the OPM's on board and get, kind of that round. I took a look back at like a couple of projects that I've been involved in that been bid in the last 2 years. And I think your square footage numbers seems like it's pretty right on, $550 to $600 a square foot. And so I think at least to get a ballpark number of where we're going to be at, I think between the program and that, we should hopefully at least get a decent idea, So,
Do either of you have a program document from some other project that would give Chief something to kind of compare when he's looking around for what that looks like? Just how what the components are of it. So, or if not, we could start kind of trying to put some pen to paper about what the program ought to be if we know what the elements are.
Excuse me, Blythe.
Yes, Matt.
I think Peter Petruchik would be a great resource on this, because I do believe all this documentation exists. I just don't know where it's at. But they did not just, there was a lot of program. They had numerous meetings, and they did reviews of what the station, what the department needed for the amount of calls and the apparatus. So there is an existence of that type of document. I am aware of. I'm sure it needs to be updated from a few years ago, but there is something there.
Great. Okay, Chief and Pete, you know what you're doing. Your next task is. Okay. Everyone ready to move on from the budget? Okay. So the major first step for the committee is to approve and put out the request for proposals. So with Matt's help, I started doing that, and that's the rather large document that you got in your packet. This is one I received from another town that I think does basically a good job of these sorts of things. And it includes, we take a step back. In Massachusetts, you need to follow various procurement laws for all the things that we do. And when you're hiring someone such as an owner's project manager, you have to follow these Chapter 30B and put out a request for proposals, or in this case, a request for qualifications. And you have to have specifics in there about how you do that. We're fortunate that both Matt and Todd have taken all of the trainings that the state puts out there for procurement. So they are very good at making sure that these are up to snuff. So this is not complete yet. It's very much a draft. And I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at it, but I would like to spend a few minutes going through it. Especially since I think we should spend some time on the overall introduction and scope of services of what we're looking for. But the document includes those things, gives the companies who want to submit a proposal instructions on how to do with it. We have to be very clear about what our selection procedure is going to be and how we're going to rate companies. So that's included. We've taken a stab at a schedule. It may not be exactly right, but it's kind of our first thought. The guidelines for how the committee will go through the proposal review process. We've included a sample contract from our town council and the various forms that firms need to sign off on when they submit a proposal. Matt and I were working on this up until the late on Thursday. And so I know it's not complete, but it's, like I said, our first step. But I'd ask you to take a look if you can pull it up, and I can put it on my screen if you need me to. The introduction, I think, is important. And Aaron, you asked about this when you asked what the project, what the selectmen's goals were. We took a stab at what we think staff thinks the project goals are. But I think it's important that all of you have a chance to weigh in on these as well.
Blythe, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page as you. I'm on page 16 of the packet. Is that for the introduction? Oh, you're not, because you're not looking at the packet.
I'm looking at it in paper.
Okay.
Let me call it up on my screen. Hold on a second.
I think I'm 90% sure I'm in the right place.
Yeah, at the top of it says section 1- introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it is page 16. I'm looking at it too.
So in this, I'm trying to give a quick overview about the town and the status of the station. The chief pointed out to me I had the number of people who work in it incorrect. And then I listed what I thought were some important goals. And at the end, we talk about the $8 to $10 million, the amount of money we have available. and so on. So I didn't intend for this meeting for us to decide and approve this tonight. I want to make sure everybody, is comfortable with what we're doing. So that's why I was on the agenda for discussion. But I think a thing for us to talk about is, do we agree with these project goals? Are there ones that you think are important that we didn't include? So if you have any thoughts on that, it would be great to hear them.
I don't see anything that's glaring out of it, Blythe.
Sorry?
I don't see anything that's glaringly wrong with it. It looks pretty good
Okay,
from my standpoint, anyway.
excellent.
Blythe, let me ask a procedural question in terms of our committee's communication and whatnot. I know, like say with the planning board, we're not encouraged to talk to each other, especially by email outside of a public meeting. As the makeup of this committee, are we more free to email, or are we in the same conditions in terms of public meetings?
The rules are the same regardless of what committee you're on. What I would say is that, with a committee of 7, we absolutely, you can't have 4 people constitutes a quorum. But if you wanted to pick up the phone and say, call, Chris and ask his thoughts about something, you can do that. It would be better if it was not by email.
Right, so
Go ahead.
So sorry, specifically if we wanted to share comments on this RFQ, we would email them to you?
That would be the best. I'm a committee member.
Oh.
We can have one of my assistants, Judith, who you got the packet from. She can be I feel comfortable in saying she can be the conduit, send the comments to her individually, and she can spit them back out to everybody else.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm glad you brought that up. If some of you have not served on a public committee before, please know that all of your electronic correspondence is considered a public record. So if someone wanted to make a public records request for all of the emails between committee members for the fire station building committee, we would be reaching out to all of you to say, we need to get copies of all of those. Now, if they're coming through our server, we probably have them already. But if say 2 of you were, to email each other from your personal addresses and it didn't come to the committee, then that would be a record that we didn't have. So I think it's always a safe practice to make sure you create a new little folder wherever you keep your email and just slide every one of them in there, just in case. But know that if you do send it to a norfolk.ma.us address, we are going to capture it and we're going to be able to keep it going forward. So just a good thing to know up front. But yes, you can talk outside of a meeting. It's just, if 2 people are talking, the other 5 don't know, sometimes that can create challenges. So
So in other words, the entire committee has to be together before we can talk?
you don't have to, like I said, 4 of you cannot be together. If 4 of you all ended up in the frozen food aisle at the local Roach Brothers and started chatting about, the training room, that would be a problem. You could argue it was a, incidental meeting. You didn't plan to meet up in front of the, the Ben and Jerry's, but
I never do that.
Okay, pick your favorite aisle. Go to the grocery store at all. But seriously, yeah, you can talk outside of a meeting. I would suggest it's better done over the phone. and you're not emailing each other back and forth.
Can we
It's
create
the
a,
hardest on a committee of 3 because 2 people constitutes a quorum. So they really can never talk outside of the meeting. But, if Jim, if you want to call Kevin or, call me about something, that's okay. But I
Can we
wouldn't
get a
get back together to say, hey, let's sort out the size of the apparatus bay, on Saturday morning, just 4 of us. That would be a problem.
can we get a contact list going with everybody's numbers and emails?
That would be great. You took the question off my to-do list tonight. If you could all send Judith your best contact info obviously we have your email addresses, but I don't know if you prefer to give us your cell phone or whatever, but be happy to make one.
Okay, great.
So I know we have a little bit of cleanup to do on the introduction, and we're going to do that. But what I say is, if anyone has any other thoughts about the project goals, let me know, so we can work towards finalizing that. And for now, I think it's best to leave the overall project to what we estimate the cost to be a little open-ended. We've got to work on that. And I think we've told prospective companies, look, we don't have all the money yet. We know we're going to need more. Nobody's surprised. Just the question is how much.
No more.
That's Todd's stock answer to just about everything I ask him.
Actually, Todd, I got a clarification question on the budget. That somewhere between $3 and $10 million number, is that's an all-in budget, or is that hard costs or soft costs included? Like where's the line there, or isn't there?
Give me a little bit more expansion on your question, because
So let's take, for instance, the number we had for the police station was $10.8 million. Did that
that's final
include,
number, yeah.
did that include fees for the OPM and the clerk
Yes.
of the works? And,
Yep,
so
everything.
that's an all-in cost.
That's an all-in cost.
Okay.
And the good news is we get to figure out what the budget needs to be. The bad news is it'll be, if it's more than people want to pay, then we run into a problem. So
That cost also incorporated the land acquisition, and we also had some of the systems that we had to procure for the police station. We're also going to benefit the fire station. So some of that number of the overall is benefiting the current fire station and the future fire station, such as a private fiber optic network, all our phone systems, and there's a few other systems that are between both of them.
Yes, and that cost that did incorporate some of the site services that were done at the fire station to prep it. We did clear some of the ledge and area next to the church. So those costs, there is a little bit of a cost in there. There's some costs that were expended for the architect to do some of the design. We didn't pay for the whole thing, but we did have to cover some of the costs. So there is a little bit in the 10.8. So when I say 10.8, that's our all-in to date on both the police station, which is complete, and the fire station to date, where it is now. We have another 3.3 that we can put towards it, and then whatever balance is based on our final numbers to complete the construction.
That's a very good clarification. Thank you. So we may run up to a tough public question where someone says, look, you've already spent X amount on the fire station, and now you're talking about X amount, Y amount more.
Yeah, that's true. So one
Just
of the
let,
things,
just let Blythe handle that question.
Will do.
one of the numbers that I still have in yellow in this document, if you go into the next page, which is section 2, scope of services, is the not to exceed figure for the OPM. I think I saw another project where the number was about 70,000. It's one of those situations where you don't want to have it too low that nobody's interested in taking the job. You don't want it too high and giving people the impression you're willing to spend, an awful lot for the services provided. I haven't got any good sense of what to plug in here yet. So if anyone has some thoughts on that, I would love to hear them. Any experience that,
Yeah, I can ask on those last couple projects. You know, Ashland and Tewksbury were both done in the last couple of years. I can ask what the architect we worked with there, what the OPM fee was, if they know, you know, or range.
yeah, I
What
want
was
to
the
be,
OPM fee, Blythe, on the police station?
yeah, we have that information. I know I've got the contract for it. We can get you that detail.
Wasn't there a couple there?
There was one firm, just multiple people, till they were till we parted ways. Todd, you happen to have that factoid off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, but Jim, with respect to the OPM, there was a couple of different OPMs that came through on the contract. And we had many sit downs and talks with the OPM on various difficulties that we were having with both getting reports, the work itself to date and so forth. And then fortunately, we had the experience, and unfortunate for Matt, he took on the responsibility of becoming the project manager on a going forward basis, which really helped out the overall project because the way it was going down a road that we didn't really want to go. So we spent a lot of money on the OPM for not a lot of services with respect to that.
We have the contract that we signed with that firm, Jim. We can get that out, and we also have the final amounts we paid them. So we'll definitely let you know about that. Good question. And so that number comes up in a couple places in this document, so we want to nail that down. Further along in the document, in section 6 is a project schedule, which is very preliminary at this point. The thought behind this is that we spend up to a year getting our sea legs here, hiring the OPM, hiring the architect, and getting the feasibility study done so that we can get the green light to jump into design. And not, my guesstimate was if we got that done, in a year, perhaps at the earliest, we could be heading to a town meeting in 2023, probably fall, not spring, to ask for the difference of the funds that we need. I think that would be, I guess I'll ask some of the experts in the room, is a year for going through phases of design going to be enough? Is it longer? I'm thinking a year to a year and a half, but I'm not the expert here.
Blythe, a lot of the public schools that are being built today are being built by the same architect. So they go up, they're almost like cookie sheets. Is there an architectural firm that's done a lot of these new fire stations that are being built that we don't have to start from the bottom and work up? I'm just asking the question to see if that's a feasibility thing. I know AHA, we work with them all the time, but I don't know if they're the actual people that do the designs for the fire station. I mean, the people that do the schools, like I said, they're all the same. The electrician goes in there and it's like count by the numbers. I don't know if there's an architectural firm that's been doing all of these new police stations, like the one you see in Medway and Millis and all the rest of them. I don't know how that acquisition process is an RFP.
Yes, it's the same. We're going to do the same process basically twice.
Right.
First for the OPM, then for the architect. I can tell you that I reached out to my town administrator colleagues in the area and said, I've heard of good OPMs, I've heard of bad ones. Who you guys depend on these people to bring your projects home on time and budget and everything. Who's good out there? And I got consistently 2 names. So I'm guessing that there's similar out there in the public safety world, but different from schools. If you're in the MSBA program, and Matt can correct me if I go astray on this answer, they dictate a process. And Matt, did they make you use their architect they choose?
They make you, yes, they assign you an OPM firm and they also assign you an architectural firm and you work with them. There's no option.
Yeah, so this is a little bit different in that there's no strict rule like that. There's also no money coming from the state for it, so. We have the latitude, if that's a good thing, to pick the firm we think is best for the town.
So you can do that. If you
Yeah.
find a particular architectural firm that like specializes in building fire stations and police stations, you have the alternative to pick them rather than someone that knows nothing about what you want. They're just going to start from the bottom and work up.
Exactly, and so when we put out an RFP for an architect, we're gonna tell them that we want them to have a certain amount of experience building public safety buildings. Just because you've only done yacht clubs doesn't mean you're in the best situation to do a police station. There used to be a company called Allen Leave Associates. I think he's probably retired now. When I was working on a police fire station in Lincoln, Mass in the mid-90s, he was the guy for police stations. I don't know who if there are any particular firms. JHA, who we had for the police and fire station, was supposedly that similar situation. Just didn't work out ideally for Norfolk.
No, it didn't.
So,
Yeah, I think you're using the term RFP. I think technically it's an RFQ that you have to hit the right blood. So
you're right. I sometimes use those terms interchangeably. My
right, so
mistake.
there's technically no fee, I think, submitted, Jim, to your point. It's all, the architects are just giving you their qualifications, then you're basically negotiating your fee with them,
Correct.
with the one that you kind of shortlist.
They do two envelopes. They do basically they submit their qualifications and you do review the qualifications first with your committee and your guidelines you're going to review them with. And then they also at the same time submit an unopened envelope for their base price that you can work with, but that doesn't get open at the same time.
Right, so you go through and you on paper, you determine who are the ones who qualified to what you set out as your expectations. Then you interview those firms and you pick the one you think is and you do reference checks, and you pick the one you think is best for Norfolk, and then you open the prices, and then you can negotiate from there. So you're picking truly who is best qualified to do your project. That's what this whole document is meant to do. How do you apply to work with us? What the process is to get selected? What the contract is that you're going to sign with us? And no surprises, ideally.
With a public project like this, does this have to go through like a public advertisement, or are we able to? It does. Okay.
Oh yeah, we're going to put
Yeah,
it
I
out
figured.
in the central register.
Yep.
Combis,
Combis,
paper.
our website.
And that's what they submit through is Combis, that system.
Go ahead, Matt.
Most likely, well, we have to register it on Combis. Most likely, what we're doing, we've had success over the years with doing everything electronically through Project Dog, which is basically just a hosting system. And so we run the project itself through that, but we will advertise. The state has different qualifications, different criteria for what you have to advertise for what you're doing, but we would follow all the state laws and try to best it as well to get the most interest.
Okay, thank you.
While everybody was talking, I did a search here for Fire Station Architect, Massachusetts, and there's quite a collection of information that comes up. Although there are a number of, I would say, recent fire stations listed here, like 2019, 2020, each one has a different architect associated to it. So, although there are some names here that I know have done more than one. So,
yeah, I know we're probably too early in throwing names out there, but I've also done work with a couple different architects that regularly do municipal buildings and public safety buildings. You know, had both good and bad experiences.
There's actually a lot of public information out there because they're public
Yeah.
projects. So RFQs and
When it comes to
RFPs. and-
OPMs, the two names that I heard consistently were Compass
Yep.
and Vertex from Weymouth. Full disclosure, I did work with Vertex on a complete historical renovation of the Upton Town Hall, and that went really well. So I don't know the other firm, but their name Compass actually came up more often than Vertex in terms of thumbs up from the public managers out there.
I've worked with Compass on multiple projects, and you know, had good experiences on all those.
And Chief Kinney, if you probably going to reach out to your peeps and say what architects have you worked with, and who would you welcome back, and who would you vote off the island?
Yeah, and DRA is one of the ones that I've regularly seen on a lot of those projects.
Yeah, I definitely have, spoken with some of my colleagues around who have done, different projects, different scales and levels of projects, some being far beyond the scale of what we're doing, and others that are, along the lines of what we're trying to accomplish. And, trying to get some information and some positive experiences that are out there. So I'll definitely make sure to push that information along once I get it.
Great. So just back to my question, any sense from from anyone on the group about the time for design and being ready to take us through that process and be ready to go asking town meeting for more money? Is a year to a year and a half reasonable?
Is that through the completion of all the design documents, or is that so that's
ready to go to bid?
yeah, ready to go to bid? I mean, I think a year and a half is probably pretty close, in my opinion.
I think it might
Yeah.
depend a little bit on the architect that you pick too, that if he's got basic designs that he can just modify them to fit our needs, it might cut the time down a little bit. Like I said, but rather than start from the ground and work up, if they've got a template for a fire station. I don't know. I don't know on the public side how this works. On the private side, it's a little bit easier to do that, but
Yeah, some of the things we've already talked about here too, Blythe and Jim, like, are we going to reuse the existing building, right? So all of a sudden now, if you're talking about incorporating the existing building, now you've only got half of your cookie, right? So
it makes it a lot more difficult on the design side.
Exactly. So I was going to say, Blythe, a year and a half from what point?
Finishing, so a year from now, we finish feasibility. We know we're gonna, replace the building in stages on site, and now we're ready to start schematic design.
Yeah. So I think a year and a half from being able to hire the architect is achievable. I think in order to make that achievable, we need to have our act together with having the program set, set, not like, and agreed that we're not changing it, right? We need to have the budget set. We need some of the things that we're talking about here. We need to have a much better, more clear picture of our expected outcomes, than we do today, obviously.
Sure.
But if we can do our job in a period of time and deliver that information for that team to act on, a year and a half it seems reasonable to me.
Because, on the horizon is an expansion of Freeman Kennedy School. And so, I want this project, this project needs to get done, and that project needs to get done. And if they came to town meeting at the same time, something is likely not going to pass. So I'd like to be able to continue to move forward as quickly as appropriate, so we can get to yes and get this one done and be ready to then, you know, ask the town to take on that project in its own time frame.
You know, that's something we might want to put right into the schedule to say that, look, hey, the town needs to act in this time frame, and let's schedule it into the project. And you tell us when we have to have decisions made in order to support that schedule.
Sure.
But when I say you, I mean the OPM,
Yep.
not you personally, Blythe.
Yep.
I just think just out of how the process would work, we're going to be 2.5, 3 months out before, even if we decided to go with this advertisement. By the time you advertise it, give it a couple of weeks, reviews a couple of weeks, set up interviews a couple of weeks, make decisions a couple of weeks. We're looking probably 3 months before we have an OPM. Best case scenario.
Yep.
And best case beyond that is another 3 to 6 for an architect. Right. So, and you're
Which is
a
why
year out. You're
the
a year out
schedule
before you.
is on our agenda tonight.
Exactly. I mean, you're a year out before you're turning it over to the architect who has a year and a half to go to bid. Right.
Yep. Okay. Well, as I say, I wasn't looking for an approval on this tonight. I know internally we have a little bit more work to do on it. You know, a lot of this is a somewhat boilerplate of what we expect and how the process works. But what I would ask is if you all could take a look at it in the next few days, week, and give us any thoughts you have about any of it, or if you've done any of these projects before, you think there's something missing. Really rely on your input on that to get it in good shape so we can, I think at our next meeting, whenever that's going to be, get it approved and get it out the door. And so myself, Matt, Todd will work on getting that part, get it out the door, advertised, and in process. Anything else about the RFQ anyone would like to talk about?
The only thing I did have a chance to kind of glance through it. Blythe, I didn't read it really in depth, but so it seems like we're going to hire an architect to go and only really engage them to go through feasibility, or rather schematic design, and then not necessarily be tied to them in case I think things go awry to go through the rest of the design. But the OPM we're hiring through bid phase, is there any reason to only hire them through the same time frame?
I guess the only thing is if the committee's not satisfied with their work, you know, I think it sometimes can be a helpful strategy to say, you know, you're being hired for this through this phase, and we'll, you know, negotiate continuing, just so there's always an understanding that we want to make sure they're performing, and that we don't feel that we're tied to them if it's not working out. Is a way to approach it.
I guess I wasn't sure if we should be making the same time frame for the OPM as well, and only engaging the
Sure.
OPM through feasibility or schematic design.
I think it's something to consider. Anyone else have any thoughts about that?
Just that it might extend the process, right? Because you gotta, I mean, you're constantly going through the reaffirmation, rebidding process too. So yeah, you might, at some point, you might want to weigh the pros and cons of the strategy.
Okay, well, let's give that some more thought. Okay. So the next item on the agenda was to discuss the temporary trailer space during the project. So, you know, you've all been by the station, you know that we have what was, I guess, meant to be a temporary trailer where the staff on a shift it's their bunk space, it's their dinner table, it's, you know, where they hang out if they're not on a call or in the training room or working, you know, in the apparatus bay. And it's gotten a little more difficult because what was for a few years, a shift of 3 or 4 people is now a shift of 4 people every shift. And as we think about wanting to stay on campus, if you will, during construction, for whatever that's going to be, at some point, not having people in the exact building is part of the equation, and where do they go? So Matt has had some thought for a while about having the town acquiring a bigger trailer that could serve now and through construction. So Matt's here tonight to tell you all about his thoughts about that. Again, not to make a decision tonight, but to just give you some insights into what we're thinking about so we can make good decisions for the future. Hey, Matt, can you tell us your thoughts, please?
So yes, currently, and COVID's made it even more interesting, but the trailer that they have is way undersized for what they're trying to do and what they've been doing from day one. It was supposed to be a stopgap, a temporary solution, which has become a semi-permanent solution. The trailer has 1 bathroom, has a tiny kitchen with an eat-in table that you have to get up and move so somebody can go to the bathroom. It's that small in there. It's not working, and it's very difficult. And now that we have 4 people on, they've taken a storage closet and turned it into a bunk room, which is less than ideal. But we know that we need more space for their living quarters. They are there for 24 hours at a time. It is their home. What I had looked into doing is trying to, we know that we're gonna have to move out of the station one way or the other. If depending on whether we remodel or replace, we'll have to phase it, because I'm assuming that no matter what, the apparatus bay is not going to last, whatever route you all decide to go to, because it's physically too small. The dimensions to get the vehicles in the doors, you can barely fit in trucks. They've had to open the header of one of the end bay just to get the ladder truck in, and there's no room for Plimo vents. There's no room for anything in there. So the apparatus bay, one way or the other, are going to have to be dealt with. And I'm pretty positive it's going to have to be replaced. But what one school of thought was when we were doing this before is, if we're going to need a temporary office trailer and we're going to need living quarters, knowing that the living quarters are already maxed out and basically falling apart because they're not designed to have nonstop wear and tear the way that you have 4 grown adults happening for years and years and years. We looked into doing a double wide trailer, and basically in the same footprint of where the current trailer is, and pull the current trailer out and mothball it until we go to construction, which we can then turn that into a office trailer for the fire department staff. But we wanted to get a double wide, which would have would have 2 bathrooms, a sleeping area for each person, an individual room, so they have a little privacy, a larger kitchen area, and make life a little bit better for the next few years while it's going on, and make it so it's more accommodating. Because I can honestly say, I'm not a taxpayer in Norfolk, but I live, I'm very passionate about Norfolk. It's a miserable situation those guys have to deal with in this one. So if we did a double wide, it's going to solve a relocation need, and it's going to free up the other trailer for the office. Like I said, we'll have a better return on investment because we'll be using it for longer, which would be better for the town. And if we left it there, and if we, depending on how we phase the building, the construction, it will be out of the way. I imagine we'd raise the apparatus bay and put another one up, and but we'd probably put it on the other side of the building, which is now basically this ledge parking lot, and leave this in of the building up. And then a lot of different ideas have floated through over the years, but the double wide would make it so it's more livable for now. It'll buy us some time. It'll accommodate, especially with, we're now under the OSHA rules, and we're not really providing a very healthy environment for the fire department to live or to, stay at, especially with the COVID, with the whole 6-foot thing. That was impossible from day one in that trailer. But we've got some preliminary pricing. The biggest thing is going to be for us right now is they're not very common up here because we're not looking for a luxury one. We're looking for one with basically a bunkhouse. So they're not extremely easy to obtain up here. So the costs aren't that much. The hauling up is going to be a significant amount, and whatever this anchoring is going to require. Those are our variables, but we already have sewer there. We already have electricity there. That's pole fed, so it would be nothing to increase the size to a larger amperage. The building itself has underground utilities, but the trailers there, they ran a pole to it. So it'd be very simple for the hookups, be very simple to pull the other one out. I think it would be a huge improvement. And again, it would be the best return on investment because we'd be buying it and using it for longer, and it would have a better impact for our guys and our staff.
Thanks, Matt. That's great. That's helpful. Chief, can you just give us your thoughts on the overall situation and how it's going?
Yeah. I definitely agree that, in a lot of ways, firefighters and the fire service, we're really adaptable. We adapt and overcome, but in many cases that ends up sometimes making us our own worst enemy, right? So we're making something that is way overburdened kind of work, but it really isn't working. So, hats off to my personnel for, working and making the best out of a tough situation, but it definitely is overburdened. I think as our workforce diversifies, we have females who are trying to share one bathroom with males, but even having 4 people share one bathroom, imagine if you all can imagine getting up in the middle of the night for a call and you have 4 people trying to use one bathroom. So it is an overburdened situation. It's something that we definitely need to address and would like to address. I think it's a situation that's kind of been overburdened even prior to us going to 4 per shift for 24 hours, but especially now that we have 4 per shift, 24 hours, we have 4 people sleeping in there, 4 people trying to use a facility that was really designed for 2 and was a stretch to get 3. Now we got 4. So, it is definitely an overburdened situation. I think, it's something that, to have a solution that would get us to the end goal would be great. I think it would have a positive impact on our morale as well as, make the space and what we have more functional and, a better use to the town.
And one of the things just with the lot size, how we had looked at it before, there should be enough square footage in the lot to set it back so it would be able to stay outside the construction area, which was another idea, where it's at, and just there's a bunker behind with Verizon or Comcast. But we feel from measuring it out multiple times that there'd still be ample room to have a construction site while staying on site. Because relocation costs would be ridiculous if we had to go off site.
So that starts an initial thought. Again, we weren't looking for a decision tonight, but just wanted to let you know some of the things that we've been thinking about. If any of you have some experience in this area, that's great. Or it's something we can also involve our OPM with when that firm comes on board. Questions, thoughts about any of that?
Has any thought been given to what happens to, I guess, both of those trailers at the end of the construction process when they're no longer needed? Can they be reused by the town? Can they be resold? Some kind of a cost analysis to make it, more palatable to purchase now.
Good question.
You know,
Matt, any thoughts about that?
Sure, I wasn't sure. Yes, we would probably most likely auction them off, or if there is another. I don't see any other public safety issues going on, but in the future, on top of the Freeman Kennedy School, there's going to be a need for a DPW in some amount of years. So, depending on what the value, they depreciate horribly, especially when they're not like buying a nice house in Norfolk. They're not going to appreciate. They're going to depreciate very quickly. So I don't know what we'd get out of it. But the thing is no matter what we do with any of this, we're going to have to relocate out of the building. they're going to need to have a space for the fire department to function out of, and not just the admin office, but for the guys, because there's training that they do. So we need a space. So my view on it is things are constantly raised. Nothing's going down in cost. Everything's going up in cost. And if we can get 3 or 2 years out of something as opposed to 6 months out of something or a year, we're going to be doing better for the town. We're spending our money more wisely because we're having a better return on investment because we're getting more use out of it. And I highly doubt we're going to get much on the flip side of it, but there would be some sort of value to it.
Yep. Yeah, I asked the question. I totally agree that it's needed, and I think a good idea to have it there rather than try and relocate. Is the purchase of that something that has to go to a town vote, or it's not? Okay, then you don't have to make it palatable to the residents then.
3.3 million, someone may say, why did you buy that trailer? You could have spent that on, whatever, but that's a choice. Anytime we're going to spend some money going forward is a choice, unless for construction. But I don't recall what the thought was about moving the whole fire station to the DPW for a year, but that had to have a huge cost to try and make that even somewhat possible. And we're not suggesting that at all if we can stay on site.
Yeah, I think that's one of the that's definitely one of the advantages to being able to stay on site. That is one area where I've spoken to some of my colleagues, and they've done some projects. And one of the most overwhelming and costs that don't have a huge benefit has been the temporary relocation or temporary having to build or move to a DPW or move to a different site with a temporary building has been astronomically expensive and added, significant cost to the overall project. And I think this is something that could be advantageous for us, where we don't have to, doing the double wide is far less expensive than having to completely relocate or repurpose a building that's not designed to accommodate or have people in it 24 hours. Making adjustments and spending money on something that we just talked about or mentioned that is the next thing up for replacement or being redone, which is the DPW potentially. So, it's definitely advantageous for us to be able to stay on site, and should hopefully reduce the overall cost of the project.
And Chris, just if I may, we had looked into we did some high level looking into relocating the fire station or the DPW, because that was mentioned and that started to gain some traction. The facility itself, it does not have enough power, doesn't have enough power capacity, doesn't have a fuel source that would be easy to use and to protect. We'd have to put all the apparatus into the vehicle storage bay, which is, that could be done, but we also have to have some more access to the building. We'd have to put temporary facilities with showers, and we'd have to do all data. There'd be so many different systems that have to go over there. It was going to be ridiculously expensive. And then on the flip side is the DPW. They have their own emergency stuff that they have to do, and their trucks don't like starting up in the freezing cold to go plow. So there's going to be infrastructure that we looked into, running circuitry outside to plug in block heaters for their trucks. And then you have problems with it's not the most secure area down there. So there was a lot of looking into that. So we really say what you might, the keeping it on site would be by far the cheapest and least impactful to the town and the fire department itself.
That's what drove the first project goal of remain on site.
It sounds, easily justifiable then to, save a lot of money in the long term.
What is the lead
Anybody
time
else?
from the time?
Go ahead.
Sorry, what's the lead time from the time that the funds are allotted till the time that the trailer will be occupiable?
I think it's a matter of a procurement, Matt, right?
Yes, we'd have to advertise. Nothing simple with public works, and that's something that can't be overlooked. So I'd have to put an a request for proposal. IFP, invitation for IFB, invitation for bids. Come up with the specifications of what we're looking for. Advertise it. That takes a few weeks. Review all the advertisements, and then we have to then issue an award the bid, and then we have to find whichever manufacturer can actually make it, and then we have to, and they're mostly from down south that I found so far. It's been probably about 50 to 80 hours of reviewing manufacturers of trailers, and they're mostly down south. So then we'd have to coordinate getting on their construction schedule, because it's not like a normal model somebody would want to buy. Then we'd have to get on a schedule for having it hauled up to the Northeast, and then have another schedule for having a crane service set in place. So it would be, if you guys said, let's do it today, it'd probably be 4, 5, 6 months at minimum, I'd say. Plus with COVID, everything has really become difficult. And so I'd say if we did it, it would be a minimum of 6 months. It's not from lack of trying, it's just trying to.
So my thought was that we get the OPM on board, and part of their job is in this feasibility is figuring out that we can actually build the station we want to build on site. That so staying on site makes sense, and if it does, can we fit the trailer as Matt thinks we can? Does that all going to work? And then if it is, then the committee can decide, yep, okay, let's go ahead and buy that. Staff, go do that, and have the OPM assist you in getting a trailer and getting it here and situated and ready to go.
Do we need the OPM to specify the trailer for us, or can we work up to the point of bids concurrently with establishing who the OPM is, so we kind of shorten that timeline a little bit?
We can definitely work on that being ready to go. We don't need them to approve it. It's just a matter of, if they're supposed to be helping guide the project, then we just want to make sure that they agree that our thought of doing this, makes sense.
From the bid standpoint, are we required to go with the lowest bidder or with the one that demonstrates the, the best value to the town?
In regards to the trailer,
Yeah.
we'd put a set of bids, and we'd put out specifications that we need X amount of bedrooms, X amount of insulation value, X amount of bathrooms, this many square feet. That to be generic to the fact that you can't make it so it's too hard for people to bid on. And yes, we'd have to give it to the lowest quality.
Okay.
So the qualified thing is, somebody can say, yeah, here, here's something for $50,000, but if it doesn't meet our specifications, we say no. But that's where your OPM and this group will have to review all that to make the decision. But you create specifications, and they have to follow it, or else you disqualify them.
It would be the lowest responsible and responsive bidder requirement that we'd have to adhere to.
Those are the words. Yes.
But do we need the OPM to do that?
We don't need the OPM to do the bid process for us. I'm just suggesting that we want to make sure that they agree with us that this is a smart decision for the town to go that route and get the trailer. And I wouldn't want to find out afterwards, well, gee, we can't actually fit the building on the site and the trailer, and that wasn't a good choice. So it's just more making sure everyone's aligned on what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then that we go ahead and execute. But our staff can definitely put together a bid and go out and purchase the trailer. We don't need help to do that. We just wanted you all to be aware of that we're thinking about it, and wanted you to be, so when we get to that point, we're ready to make a decision, everyone is up to speed. Feels comfortable with it.
Well, I think it's a great idea.
Awesome.
Yeah,
It needs to be done. It needs to be done, but I think it needs to be done sooner than later.
Yeah, I agree as well. I don't see the value in delaying that process much longer. If we wait for the OPM, then that 6 months could turn into a year before we get through that whole process. So I'm just wondering how much of it we can get done before we really commit to it. When the OPM comes in, we say, we have this available, does it work? And if they say yes, we can just immediately start there, as opposed to having to start the whole process from that point.
Okay.
Well, the OPM to make that decision has to wait for the design to see if the design's going to let the trailer stay where it is. Agreed?
I'm thinking that the OPM will have enough experience to be able to help us figure that out without necessarily having the architect on board to exactly
Right.
lay out the building.
Okay.
That's my hope.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to get into a position where you got to move it once it's
Exactly.
in.
Hi, you put it in the wrong place.
Isn't it on wheels though?
I think technically they have to get secured down to like a pad or some sort of foundation.
That is the one variable, since I didn't have a budget to really dive down on this too much. So we would have to have it somewhat engineered for the different loads, for the wind load and snow load and everything, of how we're going to anchor it because of the size. Right now, we're able to use one method of securing a mobile home, but with the larger one, there'd have to be a little bit more investment of doing some calculations, which I heard we have a structural engineer here that could probably do. No, it's not just set it and it has to be properly secured with an engineered plant so it can have an inspection and everything. But as far as the utilities, they're very minimal to hook up. That is the good thing about those, because you're basically running data, electricity, water, which is already out there, and sewer, which is out there. And then you bring up a propane tank and voila. But there is pad work and a little bit of site work, and it's not just buy a trailer and put it there. There is a bit of work behind that.
It's about the project is we actually have a fairly new septic field. Is that correct, Matt?
Yes, and
So-
the septic field was it's under 10 years old, and it was designed to handle the capacity for the police and the fire before. So that's about the only, well, there's several good things about that lot there where we're going to be able to tie, we have electricity there, we have natural gas there, we have fiber there. So we have a lot of great utilities going to the building, but septic we have on site, because and we're not going to need to deal with that because it was designed for the calculations of the police department and the fire department. And even if the fire department grew exponentially, it's not going to come up with anywhere near what the two departments combined were. So we're in good shape there.
All right, well, we can start to work on the specs for a trailer and a bid document overall. So we can move ahead on that without necessarily making a decision to pull the trigger and put it on the street yet. Matt's a little busy with school reopening next week, I'll bet, but fully.
It brings up an interesting point too, that it might be worth having an asset list. Like what do we have that we can reuse? It's great to hear that we already have the septic work done. I mean, that's usually a pretty significant number in a project. So, what else? What other assets might there be that?
There's underground electricity there. There's gas in the street. There's obviously telephone, and the town actually has its own private fiber network. And on top of our private fiber, there's also the MEC fiber going through there. So we have a lot of the utilities already on site. So for one of the things that would have to happen if we were ever to relocate out of 117 Main Street, if they wanted to redo the offices, is we'd be able to scab on. Conceptually, it'd be fairly simple to hook up the other trailer and grab on our networks, because they provide. The fire department has, they're part of the MEC, and they have all sorts of different calls coming and going and different systems running. So that's a huge thing we need to protect, but it should be relatively easy how it all came in. It's below ground. We have handholds, manholes there. So to hook on to what's there, the building actually is probably one of the best situated for utilities in Norfolk that there is, as far as capacity and capabilities, what Norfolk has to offer.
Thank you, Matt. I think that's a good overview. I think your question, Aaron, is a good one in terms of assets, what we would keep in the building, what we have on site, and then what, for me, what monies were spent in the police station portion that will continue to serve. We don't have to buy again, if you will. We already own for the station when it's finished. So we can start to work on that. I've made a note about that. Cool. Anything else about the trailer? Anyone would like to talk about? Okay. So a little more mundane topics towards the end of our agenda here. First one is meeting schedule. seems like Monday nights works for people. Is that a good assumption? Awesome. Outside of town meeting time, my schedule gets a bit more flexible, but Mondays is just fine. I'm thinking that maybe if we can get together in 2 weeks, we can approve this OPM document and a couple other things. And then I think really it's hard to set an actual meeting schedule until we kind of get in a rhythm of having consultants and regular steps we have to take. So I'm not sure we're ready to set a certain, second Monday of the month or whatever it might be. How does everyone feel about that?
What's the downside of doing that?
Just that we may set meetings and then cancel them if we're not ready to have a meeting. That's about it. I'm happy to have a regular schedule. I just don't know that we have a regular amount of work to do quite yet, is my only point.
It works for me.
Yeah, so 2 weeks from now, you think to approve the RFP at least, and then TBD after that?
That's my thought.
Yeah.
And open for discussion.
I would go and throw in every once a month meeting on the calendar just so we have something there. I mean,
Yeah.
I would rather cancel it than, try to scramble to get one scheduled. That way you can, I mean, you've got to post them as public meetings and everything too, right? Blythe?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So
for,
if we met on the 12th, is the second Monday of the month work for people?
yeah,
First, third?
I don't, as long as it's a Monday, I don't think it matters to me.
yeah,
That works for me.
second Monday is fine by me.
Right,
I think that works.
awesome.
My
So-
schedule rotates, but I'll be able to make accommodations, provided there's no emergencies when I'm working.
Sure. And so that would mean our next meeting would be the Monday, the 12th. All right. And so then I think just so everyone's aware, we'll, as Matt had described the process earlier for hiring the OPM, we will have a flurry of meetings when we're going to review the proposals from the qualifications from OPMs, and then interview them and make a recommendation to select board. But as we get closer to that, we can nail down dates. And the last thing is, so while I'm just loving being the Zoom person, the chairman and the clerk tonight, and a member, I am more than happy to bequeath the chairmanship on one of you. And the one of you, I think, is probably best if it's not staff. I mean, I see my role and the chief's role going forward as he's the expert in fire, and then myself with the support of my colleagues here in the meeting are, helping move the whole project forward, whether it's procurement or it's budget or, process. I think it's best if a resident is the chairman of this committee. But since we're all meeting in our Zoom squares for the first time tonight, I don't think it's the right time to decide that someone should be nominating somebody. But I wanted to bring it up and say, hey, I think at our next meeting, we ought to try to do that. So I guess for each of you, give some thought to whether you'd like to take on that role. At a minimum, we need a chairman. Some committees also have a vice chair in case the chair can't act or has to miss a meeting in some reason. And they have a clerk. I'm going to take the minutes tonight. I'm going to write them up for the committee's approval. And I think at some point, if I'm going to, playing an active role in the committee, I would like to see if we can find a clerk who can take minutes, whether they come to the meeting or they watch a tape and do them, just because that's going to be hard to do both after a while and be intimately involved. But I'll keep doing it till we figure that out. So like I said, I don't know if anyone wants to chat about it anyway, but my thought was we try to make that decision soon.
So I haven't been on a town board before, but what is the basic, I mean, what are the responsibilities of the chair of that?
So approving the agenda that we're going to talk about at each meeting. So I would see, I compare it to, I guess, somewhat my role of the select board. I draft the agenda for the select board chair, review it with them, make sure that's what they want to do. And I put together the background, and then the chair runs the meeting and manages the actual agenda that we've put together. Asks for motions, helps guide the committee through the meeting. So somebody who wants to maybe manage the project on a slightly higher level and help guide the rest of the group through this whole project. So I think if you've had some project management experience, that's helpful. And also be the head of it in case someone wants, another committee has a question about our project, should be that the initial point person. Though we may get to the point where it's helpful to have one of the members be kind of a liaison to conservation if we're going to need support from them, or a liaison to green communities in terms of energy committee, planning board. There may be, I think there can be roles for everybody to play. We're not just picking chairman and nothing else. We're going to have to figure that out as we go along.
Yeah, so Blythe, I guess I can throw this out there that I'm not sure that I want to take on a chair position, but I'd be happy to take on a vice chair position. And given that I have a bit of experience here with the town from various committees, the planning board, et cetera, I probably have some, well, whether you want it or not, I have some opinions and advice on what it might take to be a chair. So if that helps anybody, knowing that you've got someone who's willing to support you, that has been around town and whatnot here for a number of years now, that I'm happy to take on that more of a support position if that works out.
Okay. Like I said, this was not to be a pressure item on the agenda tonight. It was more to just get everybody thinking about it so that we can hopefully make decisions next time. But I think it's if any of you are interested, it might be feel welcome to reach out to chairs of other committees and ask them how it goes. But I mean, one thing definitely want to continue to do is to support whoever is doing that with, someone's got to actually draft the agenda and get the packet out. My office is definitely planning to continue to do that. So it's not something that I expect you to be actually typing that and making sure it gets posted on the website and all that. That's going to be happen at a staff level. And part of the reason where a clerk would be helpful to me to just make sure that someone's backing me up and getting all that stuff done on time, because there's rules to follow for the open meeting law to do that all correctly.
So I'm sorry, is the clerk someone in this committee, or is that someone on your staff?
I mean, generally, so like on the select board, one of the members is a clerk, and their role is to review the draft minutes that staff puts together to decide that they're correct or they're not and recommend them to the rest of the committee. I'm looking for there to be a person who just works on, say, a per meeting basis to take the minutes, excuse me, and type them up, so that I'm not trying to do that too. Because I'm finding tonight I'm having a hard time taking notes while kind of trying to conduct the meeting. And I know I've kept a couple of people waiting in the waiting room because I wasn't keeping my eye on who wanted to join. So if we decide to have a clerk, it's someone who just review the minutes, not actually take them or type them. So, like I said, no one needs to, jump up and down and raise their hand and say, yeah, me. But if you all could think about it, and what I thought I'd do is put an item for action on the next meeting is to have whomever might like to step up to one of those roles. If you want to give me a call offline to chat about it, feel free. I'm happy to talk with anybody about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that speaking for my cohorts on the planning board, if you wanted to talk to the chair of the planning board or the clerk of the planning board too, I'm sure they'd be happy to share their experiences.
And if you need any contact information for those people, again, I can help with that as well. I'm sure Aaron can if you're calling a planning board member.
I served as the clerk for the planning board, but it was for a short period of time. It's just the way it worked out. The new person serves as the clerk. And I happen to be the new person for a very short period of time. So I don't have much experience to share, but
Yeah, and we can't have 5 clerks. So well, those are the things I had scripted on the agenda. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about that we weren't aware needed to be on the agenda tonight?
Blythe, I guess just thinking out loud here, I don't know if the committee members are aware of some of the work that's going on downtown between master plans that have happened over time and the current B1 committee. But there is a lot of talk about what's, the future of downtown Norfolk is. So if anyone's interested in some of those meetings and the histories, that there are YouTube links and whatnot out there, or I'm happy to try and share what my involvement has been through the planning board and various other committees. So something to keep in mind. There's a lot of conversation going on about what downtown Norfolk is, and of course this fire station will be right in the heart of it. So something to keep in mind.
Yep, those will be coming up as zoning article changes on the annual town meeting warrant, and that meeting is Saturday, May 8th. So, we just lost Jim. So I'm not sure what happened. Okay, well, is there anything else anyone would like to talk about? If not, we can make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
We'll get good at this. Don't worry.
We'll learn. We'll learn.
You will. That's why hopefully this meeting was a layup, and we're done in less than 2 hours. So that's good. Okay. Well, if I could just have a roll call, Kevin Champagne.
Here.
Aye is the to adjourn the meeting. Aye.
Okay.
Chris Baker.
Aye.
Aaron Kinney.
Aye.
Justin Janosik.
Aye.
Aaron Hunt.
I'm going to go with aye, and I'd just like to say it took me about a year to learn that the other response to aye was nay, since we're learning tonight. So aye.
And as I say, I think we lost Jim, and I don't see him rejoining. So I guess we're gonna and the chair says aye. So 6-0. Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to it. This is an exciting project, and I will. Please get me your contact information. We'll get that all back out to all of you. I've got a list of things to send out, so watch your inbox, and we'll plan for April 12th.
Thanks,
Have a great night.
Good. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right.